Big changes are coming for landlords in how we approach pretty much everything to do with rent, and this is in the Renters' Rights Bill. And in this video, I walk through the 5 key changes in the Renters' Rights Bill about rent. It includes how we first set the rent, how we advertise our properties, how we increase rent, and we'll have to make lots of changes to how we do things. I go through step by step so you'll know exactly what to expect and how to prepare. And whether you're an experienced landlord or just starting out, or even a letting agent, you need to understand these changes now before they come into effect so you can get ready. And as a bonus at the end, I'll be covering rent controls, and that's a hot topic.
We need rent controls.
But we could go further on rent controls.
We need a comprehensive system of rent controls.
And I'll share practical action points to help you get ready for these changes. I'm Suzanne Smith, lawyer turned landlord and creator of the independentlandlord.com website and this YouTube channel. Disclaimer, this isn't legal advice. Please don't take anything you see on YouTube as gospel, even my videos. And bear in mind, of course, that the rules may change as the bill passes through the House of Lords. And as I'm recording this on the 19th of January, it's about to be debated in the House of Lords.
Message from the Commons. They have passed the Renters' Rights Bill, to which they desire the agreement of your lordships.
And there's a blog version of this video here at the independentlandlord.com/renters-rights-rent. Right. Let's get started. Number 1, the new maximum rent period. The concept of the rent period lies at the heart of the new periodic assured tenancy system in the Renters' Rights Bill. And the rent period means, and there's a slightly convoluted definition in the bill, it says the period of the tenancy for which rent is payable. And the bill will change the law so that this period cannot be longer than 1 calendar month. At the moment, we can set quarterly or 6-monthly or termly rent periods, but when the bill comes into force, we won't be able to do any of these. And any existing agreements that say there are longer rent periods will automatically change to monthly periods on the commencement date for the bill. Well, for the act as it will be then. The rent period can start at any day of the month and it will end before the start of the next rent period. So if you have a rent period that starts on the 25th of the month, then it will continue until 24th of the following month. So if you already have monthly rent periods, this isn't anything for you to worry about, but there certainly are a lot of student landlords who have termly rent periods, etc. So you'll have to think about it if you're in that category. Number 2, the requirement to state specific proposed rent when advertising. Landlords and letting agents will need to state the amount of the proposed rent in any advertisement, listing or other offer in writing. This doesn't include a to-let board, but it would include adverts on Gumtree or Facebook, as well as, of course, the property portals. Now, this is unlikely to be a change for renting in practice because unlike the sale of property, where a range or a guide price is really common, rent is normally stated for a specific amount. However, it's really important to know this because it is at the heart of the obligation, the new obligation to avoid rental bidding, which is what I'm going to get onto now. Number 3, the rental bidding rules. The ban on rental bidding has had quite a lot of publicity, but I'm going to go through it now. So I just mentioned about how you need to set a proposed rent when you advertise. And this is really important because once you have set that rent, you can't accept an offer or encourage anyone to pay more than that. And the local authority can fine a landlord or a letting agent up to £7,000 if they are satisfied on the balance of probabilities that the person has breached the prohibition. Now, balance of probabilities is quite a low hurdle, and so that is a big deal. You're going to have to be very careful about it. Even if an applicant sends an unsolicited amount of rent that's above it, you can't accept it and you have to send it back. Now, I suspect that in areas of high demand, the proposed rents and listings will be increased to allow tenants to bid below. But do bear in mind that when you set that initial rent, somebody can accept it. And then within the first 6 months of the tenancy, they can challenge that initial rent at the first tier tribunal and say that it's above the market rent. So it's really important for landlords to keep evidence of offers from other people to show that this is a fair market rent and that you were just choosing among different applicants. And also the basis upon which you chose how to set the rent. So keep evidence of similar properties, of listings for similar properties, because they might be gone by then, or if you've had advice from a letting agent. So that's really important. Next, we move on to number 4, the banning of pre-tenancy rent payments and rent in advance. So 2 long and complicated clauses were added to the bill by the government at the report stage of the House of Commons, and they ban pre-tenancy rent payments. That's any form of rent before you both sign the tenancy agreement. You can ask for the payment of the initial rent before the tenant moves in, but you can't ask for more than 1 month's rent. And the bill also has new wording that bans terms in tenancy agreements that provide for the payment of rent in advance once the agreement is entered into. So this means you can't ask for rent to be paid quarterly or termly, and that's important if you let to students. In fact, the banning of rent in advance is a big deal for landlords who let to students from abroad. And these rules are really very important. Number 5, once the Renters' Rights Bill comes into effect as a Renters' Rights Act, there will be only one way to increase rent, and that is via first issuing a Section 13 notice, that's Form 4. You won't be able to rely on rent review clauses, as there are no fixed terms, there'll be no such thing as the annual renewal when people often increase rents, such as which is what happens often now. And instead, you'll have to use Form 4 to increase the rent. And if you want to see what this involves, take a look at my video on how to complete it. Unlike now, when you only need to give 1 month's notice, you'll need to give 2 months' notice of the rent increase. And if the tenants aren't happy with it, they'll be able to challenge it at the first tier tribunal for free. Now, they can do that now. However, where it's different from now is that if they do appeal to the first tier tribunal and challenge the rent increase, this will delay the new rent coming into force until after the tribunal comes to a decision. And the tribunals are already backlogged with cases, so I can only guess what it's going to be like once this comes into effect. And the first tier tribunal will have the power to either keep the rent the same or reduce the rent if they think that what you're proposing is above the market for a similar property in the area, and they'll take evidence on that. And this is a change from now because at the moment, the first tier tribunal can actually increase the rent if they think that what you're proposing is below the market rent. So it's quite risky for tenants to challenge it at the moment. So these new rules mean it's likely to increase the amount of appeals to the first tier tribunal. I mean, unless you've got a really good relationship with your tenants or they're not clued up on the new rules, why wouldn't they? It's no risk to them, and it delays the rent increase. And well, it may well end up increasing rents because landlords might have to factor in a delay in the start of the rent increase. But also, it's important to know that you won't be able to sign an addendum or increase rent informally. However, once you send a Section 13 notice, if you agree a lower rent with your tenant after sending the notice, then you can agree to that in writing, and the tenant won't be able to appeal to the tribunal. Now we come to the bonus topic, a hot topic of rent controls. I've had a lot of emails and messages from people saying, in the amendments, they saw that there were lots of clauses that were proposed about rent controls from people like Jeremy Corbyn and Carla Denyer. But the good news for landlords is they did not make it into the bill, and Matthew Pennycook and Angela Rayner have both said that they don't support rent controls.
The government sincerely believe that the introduction of rent controls in the private rented sector could harm tenants as well as landlords as a result of reduced supply and discourage investment.
So we can put that to one side. Now, finally, let's talk about the action points that landlords and letting agents should be looking at before the bill comes into effect. And it might come into effect as early as the summer. Number one, review all of your rents for all of your properties. Take a careful look at your portfolio and see if any of the properties are significantly below the market rent. And consider implementing a gradual, reasonable increase before the bill comes into effect. And, do remember that substantial sudden increases can cause tenant hardship and void periods, so plan and rent arrears. So plan carefully. You might want to be looking at, say, wage inflation increase, which is higher than CPI inflation at the moment. And make sure you document the local market evidence to support your decisions for the future. It's a good idea to keep screenshots of similar properties that are advertised. And I'm sure that when the time comes, there'll be lots of companies who offer this as a service. Number two, audit your rent period. Check all of your tenancies to see if any pay the rent by terms or on a quarterly basis, and if they do, start having conversations with the tenants about transitioning to monthly payments. And you might have a look at updating your bank standing order template and mark your calendar to contact the tenants well before the changes take effect. Number three, risk management planning. If you currently take rent in advance, do review your tenant vetting process and consider investing in rent guarantee insurance. You're going to have to update your affordability assessment criteria because the bill outlaws discrimination against people who can afford the rent and who have a good credit history, but who actually receive benefit. Me personally, I accept people who receive benefit if they have a good credit history. It makes no difference whether or not they're a good tenant or not if they receive universal credit. And remember that you'll need fair and transparent selection criteria so you don't discriminate against benefit recipients. Next point, update your documentation. This is something to do closer to the time. Have a look at your property listings and advertising materials and familiarize yourself with Section 13. And as I said, you can check my video on this. And think about how you're going to communicate with tenants, explaining all of these changes. Remember, preparation is key. It's not too early to be starting to think about this. So that brings us to the end. If you found this video helpful, do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Or if you don't like doing that, please at least do give me a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. Often there's lots of really interesting points made in the comments. It's worth having a look at them. I release regular updates on the Renters' Rights Bill and practical guidance all the time. And you can sign up for my weekly newsletter for free on the independentlandlord.com/subscribe. For more insights and guidance into the Renters' Rights Bill, take a look at my free training course on YouTube called Renters' Rights Bill Explained. And here's my deep dive on the rent in advance rules. I've done a video on it. See you soon.